I bought a bunch of different creatine brands ranging from 23 cents per serving to $2 per serving. To answer a question that's been bugging me for a while, which creatine should you buy? Is there a difference between the super bougie brand you see all the influencers using and your regular powdered creatine that you can buy at any old supplement store? And in short, I found that there are 3 key variables that affect the benefits of creatine that everyone needs to know before you make your choice. And the first variable is the type, like creatine monohydrate versus creapure. The next is the form, like gummies versus powder versus packets. And lastly is the additional ingredients, like salt, flavors, sweeteners, and other possible benefits. And I did a bunch of research and personal tests of each of these. And along the way of answering which creatine you really should buy, we'll also be answering a ton of other common questions, like which creatine doesn't cause bloating? And are gummies really as effective as powder? And is creatine plant-based or is it actually made from animals? And by the end of this video, you'll be a creatine expert and be able to confidently pick which creatine is going to be best for you, your goals, and your budget. So to begin, let's dive into that first variable, which is the type of creatine. But before we do that, I want to give a huge thank you to today's sponsor, Element. Element was specifically created with intermittent fasting, low carb eating, and athletes in mind. It actually uses the sodium, magnesium, and potassium to help balance out electrolyte levels, all without having any sugar. If you've been following my channel, you know that I've been using Element for years now. I used to previously just take salt for my electrolytes, but I was really not as consistent with that because it doesn't taste good to just dump salt into your water. What I love about Element is that it actually makes taking electrolytes so easy because it tastes so good. My favorite flavor is their grapefruit salt. It's so refreshing. I'll just dump it in my regular water, but I'll also put it in sparkling water or make like a mocktail with it. So delicious. And I feel better when I'm properly hydrated. I don't get headaches. I don't get muscle cramps. I just overall feel better and more energized. And Element makes it really easy to get those electrolytes in. And you can get a free 8-count sample pack of Element's most popular drink mix flavors with any purchase at drinkelement.com/autumn. Find your favorite Element flavor or share it with a friend. This is only available through my link, so make sure to check out drinklmnt.com/autumn. The link is also in the description down below. Now, your body makes creatine naturally, but we also get it from food like beef. But to really actually see the research benefits of creatine that everyone's looking for, like improved exercise, improved memory, and overall just improved brain health, we do usually need to supplement with it because our body just can't make enough and we can't really get enough from our food. Now, each creatine brand has the option of using a variety of different types of creatine. And you'll see this in the ingredients on the supplement label, like creatine monohydrate, creapure, and creatine hydrochloride, just to name a few. Like for this really common one, you can see it right here. And there are a lot of different forms of creatine that can make the space really confusing. And to be honest, before I started taking creatine a few years ago, I had no idea that there were so many different types of creatine or really that there were differences. But how they differ can impact the final cost, how much you need to take, how pure it is, and whether it will make you feel bloated. Now, while I was making this video, I was also super surprised to learn that all creatine is synthetically made. This means it's made by combining different chemicals in a lab. I assumed it was going to be similar to whey protein, where you take a whole food product such as dairy and you isolate out the protein through a series of different processes like drying and straining, but it's not. Typically, creatine is only found in animal products like beef, but it would be absurdly expensive and wasteful to extract creatine from meat. So instead, it's made in a lab. Because of this, those who are vegan or vegetarian can use a creatine supplement because it's not actually made from animals. Whereas if you're to just get it from food, you can't get creatine from plant-based products. Creatine is made by combining 2 chemicals called sodium sarcosine and cyanamide. These chemicals will react under heat and other conditions to form creatine molecules. So it's sort of like cooking, where you combine 2 completely different things in order to make a brand new thing, like blending blueberries and yogurt into a smoothie. Once it's blended, you have something brand new that isn't just yogurt or blueberries, it's now a smoothie. The same thing happens when making creatine, but at the molecular level. This new creatine mixture is then combined with something else like water to make it usable and stable. It's during this step that many creatine brands will differ. Some use water and form the most popular creatine called creatine monohydrate, whereas others might bind creatine with magnesium or hydrochloric acid to form either creatine magnesium chelate or creatine hydrochloride to increase absorption. But to keep things simple, we're just going to stick with what's most popular in the supplement industry, which is creatine monohydrate. This is the most studied form of creatine. It's typically the least expensive form, and it's often considered the gold standard. Now from here, this creatine monohydrate that is formed in the lab is processed and purified to remove any leftover chemicals or byproducts to ensure that the final product is clean and safe. And again, this is where creatine brands can start to differ. How pure is the creatine end product? Now from here, there are two main different types of creatine: regular creatine monohydrate or a branded version that's called creapure. Creapure is a name brand creatine that's made in Germany. It's viewed as the purest form of creatine with a level at 99.99%. Regular creatine monohydrate could be and is likely less pure than this, but usually still around 99.9% pure. So we're talking about a difference of 0.09%. But the question I always had when I first heard about the purity of the creatine and that one is more pure than the other is, what is the creatine pure from? Like, what type of contaminants are we talking about? Is it something that's really going to make that big of a difference? Or is it possibly something that's dangerous that we really need to be concerned about? Now, for example, going back to whey protein isolate is considered the most pure form of whey because it contains at least 90% whey protein and very little lactose. This means that per 100 grams of whey protein isolate, you're getting more protein and less lactose. So it's more pure. Versus other forms of whey, like whey concentrate, could have much less whey protein, as low as 35% and as high as 80%, which means much more lactose and a lot less protein per 100 grams. So in this example, whey concentrate would be considered the less pure option, which if you are lactose intolerant or if you're looking to really isolate down and just get the protein, that will really matter for you and your goals. But what about creatine? The impurities that we're talking about include things like leftover sodium sarcosine or cyanamide, which are those initial chemicals used to make creatine, heavy metals from processing the creatine, or the inactive form of creatine called creatinine. So the more of these impurities that the creatine product has, the less actual creatine that's going to give you the benefits you're looking for that product will have. Which the more pure the product will get, typically the more expensive that product will be also. But does the purity really matter that much? Like, does that extra 0.09% purity make a difference in order to merit that extra cost? Now, there isn't research that I found that compares the two head to head, but it's typically been considered that both purity options will give you roughly the same benefits. Some people will say with the more pure option of creapure that they get less bloating or less GI issues, or maybe a little bump in their athletic performance, but there aren't really any studies that show this. Now, the last thing to consider when it comes to this first variable of the type of creatine is whether or not it's micronized. This will determine how easily it dissolves into the liquid that you're putting it into. Micronized just really means it's broken up into further smaller pieces, which in theory should make it easier to dissolve in your water and also easier to absorb by the body and therefore possibly cause less GI issues. But I wanted to test this out myself and see how well it actually mixes into the water. So I have two different brands here. One's just regular creatine monohydrate and one's that micronized creatine. I wanted to see how it actually dissolves into water to see if it really makes that big of a difference. So let's test it out. First of all, I have to say it really bothers me when brands don't come with a scooper. This one does, which is nice, just makes things more convenient. This one is asking me to bring out a teaspoon, which okay, I will go into my drawer and grab a teaspoon. But if I were traveling and bringing this with me, I wouldn't have a teaspoon on hand. So it's a little annoying. Got my teaspoon. Okay, so first up on this side, I'm going to test the regular creatine monohydrate. So I have 5 grams here, which is the recommended serving. Okay, so you can see it just kind of clumps to the bottom, but let's just give it a little stir and see what happens. So there's still quite a few little clumpies down here, and you can see it's just kind of gritty in the water. I'm gonna let that settle while we test the micronized version. And this is the one that theoretically should be able to blend better. Got my teaspoon. You can already see that it's much more powdery. It almost has like a powdered sugar look to it, which gives me hope that it is going to blend better. Okay, and then we'll give it a stir. And we'll see, give that one a chance to let it settle. Now you can see in this one, it's just clumped at the bottom. It looks so disgusting. This is the last sip that I'm getting every time whenever I drink it from my water bottle. I don't like that. Now this one is mixing a little better. I can actually see it suspended in the water, although there is still quite a bit settled at the bottom, which is interesting. So I would say the micronized version blends a little bit better. This is the regular creatine monohydrate. This is the micronized one. So they both result in a lot of settling. So whichever one you choose, you do want to make sure that you shake it every time you do go to take a sip. So having it in a water bottle or a shaker bottle. Let's give it a taste test and see if there's difference. So here's the micronized one and here's the regular. Ugh. I don't know if it's all in my head, but the regular one just gives me this sense of like artificial or like mechanical taste, but that could all be in my head. Okay, now for the micronized. still a little bit of that like mechanical flavor almost. That flavor is very subtle though. Like if I were just drinking water, I wouldn't totally notice it, but I am kind of surprised at how much this does settle to the bottom. But I will say from actually consistently taking both the regular creatine monohydrate and the micronized version doesn't seem to cause me as much GI upset, which leads me to believe that it is going to be better absorbed by the body, even if it's not as absorbed in the water. There's like a next level one that's not as common right now, and that's called instantized, and it takes the micronized like a step further and is supposed to really dissolve in the water. But that's one I'll have to test in the future because it's just not as popular right now. Now, both regular creatine monohydrate and creapure come in this micronized option, but the micronized option does tend to make it a little bit more expensive as well because it is a next level of processing. So to sum up the first variable, when looking at the ingredients, you want to see one that uses either creatine monohydrate, creapure, or a micronized creatine monohydrate. And then we get into variable number 2, which is the form it comes in. There are 3 main forms you'll find in creatine, either the powder, the single serve packets, and the gummies. Each has its perks and each has its downsides to consider. Powder is what you can usually most easily find on the market. It comes in these bulk containers and you usually use a pre-measured scooper like this one to get 3 to 5 grams of creatine. Now the pros of something like a powder is that it's typically less expensive, from what I saw as low as 23 cents per serving, and that's because the company didn't have to pay to put it into individual packets or put it into something like gummies. Now the con is that it could be less convenient for some people. You can't just grab it and take it on the go, and it's not as easy to pack multiple servings if you're doing something like traveling. Which brings me to stick packets. These are the same product as the bulk powdered containers, but you get it in these really convenient stick packs. If you're on the go or you need to grab a few servings at a time, then paying a little extra could be worth it for the convenience because you might be paying about 80 cents or more per serving when it comes in these packets. I personally really like having the packet options because I'm not always at home when I want to be taking my creatine. So I can just take something like a packet, throw it in my bag, and have it whenever I'm ready to add it to my water. And then there are gummies, which have absolutely exploded in popularity. These tend to be the most pricey. You could expect to pay about $1 per serving, although I have seen it at up to about $2 per serving. However, the pro of this is that some people found they're more consistent with taking the gummies because they actually look forward to taking it. It also has the convenience factor where you could easily pack a few in like a small baggie and bring it with you on the go. However, there are quite a few cons to consider when taking gummies. First, they do contain added sugar, or at least they typically do contain added sugar. Some will use 0 sugar sweeteners like stevia or monk fruit or artificial sweeteners, but others can have about 6 grams of added sugar per serving. That's the equivalent of about 1 1/4 teaspoon of just pure added sugar. So I wanted to show you guys what 1 1/2 teaspoon of sugar looks like. I literally don't have sugar, so I'm gonna show you it with salt. 1, 2. Or half rather. So this is a visual example of what 6 grams of sugar could look like, although this is salt. Which it's not necessarily a huge amount, but if you are following a lower carb diet or if you are really carb sensitive, these sugars can really add up. Okay, so let's just run a quick taste test of different gummy types. Now to be clear, I wanted to give this a fair trial, a fair test. So I did do about a month of using one of the gummy versions. What I did notice is that I did start to look forward to taking it because it just tastes like candy. So there's definitely a sense of consistency there, although I also was noticing that it was like so sweet that it was hurting my teeth. That could be an individual thing because as you guys know, I do not have the best teeth. Full video right here. Now for these gummies, you need to eat 3 gummies in order to get a full serving, which a full serving for this is 4.5 grams of creatine monohydrate, and it has about 3.3 grams of sugar with 1.8 grams of added sugar. That's coming from tapioca syrup, sugar, allulose, and that's it. All right, let's try. I mean, to be fair, this one tastes better than the other flavors I tried with them, but it literally tastes like you're just eating candy. Although I will say the watermelon flavor at least doesn't taste as sweet, which is a plus, at least in my book. But one thing to note is you do get about 0.5 grams less of creatine per serving when you use the gummies, at least with this brand, versus if you just use the powder and you get the added sugars. Now, the second more concerning issue is that you might not be getting anywhere close to the amount of creatine that's advertised on the container. This was another crazy thing that I hadn't even heard of until I started researching for this video. A 2024 test that was done by Now Foods found that 5 out of 12 gummy brands had little to no creatine. This means some gummies might not deliver enough creatine to actually see the benefits, and you're pretty much just taking like some candy. The study also found that the brands that failed their test also showed signs of creatine degradation into the waste products called creatinine. Now, this is likely because of the processing involved to make the gummies. So because of this, the conclusion that the study found is that gummies aren't really the most reliable source for getting creatine in consistently. On the flip side, powders and stick packs that use powders are typically more stable and easier to test for consistency and quality. So for the second variable, if you're looking for a creatine brand that will most consistently provide you what it says it has, then you're looking at either the powdered form or the stick packets. Okay, and then we get to variable number 3, which are the additives. A lot of creatine brands don't just have creatine in it. Unless you're just looking at the straight up powdered form, you're usually also seeing that they have flavorings or sweeteners and sometimes other ingredients to boost absorption, or maybe just other vitamins and minerals to make it more of like a multivitamin. And all these different add-ons will cause the price to go up too. Regular plain creatine doesn't really have any flavor. When you mix it into water, you shouldn't really be able to taste it. Although I will say I almost get like a artificially type of flavor experience when I'm just taking creatine, which does make sense because it's not naturally made, but maybe that's just in my head. What you're more likely to experience is feeling a sense of grittiness, especially if it's not that micronized type of creatine. So you don't really need to add flavor to it in order to mask the zero flavor of creatine. But if you do like to have flavored water, then that's where choosing a creatine brand that has a flavoring in it might be a good option for you. And then there's the sweeteners, which interestingly, I found that some creatine brands will even add sweetener to their unflavored creatine, which I just don't understand. If I don't want flavor, then I also don't want sweetness, but maybe that's just me. And the type of sweetener will also range quite a bit. You could see like tapioca syrup, cane sugar, monk fruit, stevia, and of course, artificial sweeteners. Brands that use stevia or artificial sweeteners are often less expensive than those that use monk fruit because stevia and artificial sweeteners tend to just not cost as much. However, some people try to avoid artificial sweeteners for health purposes, and then there's others that don't like the bitter aftertaste of stevia, which is why they might opt to pay a little more for monk fruit. And then finally, there are other additives that are introduced to help boost the overall nutritional quality or benefits of the creatine product. So you might see the addition of something like electrolytes or B12, alpha lipoic acid, or greens. Okay, let's try one of these like creatine multivitamin types. This one has creatine, greens, mushrooms. It also has things like vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D, has B12. It has like a bunch of different stuff. And I believe it's supposed to be a green apple flavor. Smells like that green apple flavor you'd expect with candy, except with greens powders mixed in. Okay, let's give it a test. It actually doesn't taste super sweet, which is nice. The other green apple flavor for their just plain creatine was super sweet for me, and it had like a almost sugary coating, like typical candy, and that's what really hurt my teeth. This one doesn't have a huge strong flavor. You do get a little bit of that like greens aftertaste. And with this one, you get a little less creatine. You only get 4 grams of creatine per serving. So it's even a little bit less than what you get. I spoke too soon. It's hurting my teeth a little bit. To be fair, I have very sensitive teeth. But it doesn't taste too bad. Now, this brand actually sent me a bunch of their creatine to test out because what I did like about it is that it does use creapure, which is that like more pure version, and I wanted to try that out. Now, specifically sodium could be one thing that you might want to see added into your creatine because sodium has been theorized to help boost the absorption of creatine into your body. But as long as you are getting electrolytes from other sources or salt in your diet, then it's probably not necessary, but this is one type of additive that could be beneficial when paired with creatine. Everything else just isn't really necessary. You could either be getting it from other supplements or you could be getting it from your food, which personally I would rather opt for a less expensive creatine that will give me the benefits of the creatine itself and then get all those other nutrients either from other supplements or from the food itself. But what I personally like to do is combine my creatine with my element. That way I actually get the benefits of the increased absorption from the electrolytes with element, and it kind of masks that like almost chemically flavor that all creatine has for me. So for me, that's win-win. That's how I like to take creatine. Fantastic. So now we get to the creatine that I personally will be buying because I've been testing a lot of creatine. And to be honest, I'm still sorting out the specific brand that really hits all the things I'm looking for. I've even debated creating my own creatine just for that reason. But I know for sure that I'm going to be using a creatine monohydrate or creapure that's preferably been micronized. I've used this regular creatine monohydrate in the past. This was the first one that I started to use, and it works perfectly fine. However, there is a sense of grittiness to the water, and when it's gritty, it just kind of like settles to the bottom. It results in a not very enjoyable last sip. And from a gut perspective, I have noticed that I do get like a little bit queasy when I do have the non-micronized version, although I don't know if that's just all in my head or not. It's not so substantial that it's going to make me feel like first trimester nausea, but it was substantial enough that I did stop taking creatine when I was pregnant because I was already nauseous with pregnancy and I didn't want to double down on it with the nausea of creatine. And I have tested creapure versus creatine monohydrate, and I haven't noticed a huge difference from the physical benefits perspective, like the memory, the brain fog, or the exercise benefits. They both seem to have equal perks, at least for me. It's more so from a gut perspective and then a convenience perspective. I prefer micronized of really either of those, the creapure or the creatine monohydrate, so that it's better absorbed and possibly causes less GI issues, at least for me. And then ideally, I would like one that comes in a stick packet, or at the very least comes with a scooper. It is very annoying to me when a brand does not come with a scooper. But I want to hear from you guys, like based on everything that we actually covered today, which creatine do you think is going to be best for you and your goals? Do you want to use creatine monohydrate, or are you looking for the more pure option like creapure? Or do you perhaps like that there's some that are straight up a multivitamin? Or maybe you don't like that it's all synthetically made and you're just going to really try and load up on eating beef every single day at every single meal. Whatever it is, let me know in the comments below. And if you want to check out the video I did on my first 60-day experiment with taking creatine and the results that I had, you can check it out with this video next. Otherwise, if you're new to my channel and you love this science-backed information, make sure you subscribe right here. Come out new videos every Tuesday and Thursday. And this video is a little different than my usual. I really wanted to deep dive into this topic to give you all the information you'd possibly need. So if you like this type and style and you want to see more like this, if you could give the video a thumbs up, it would help let me know that you want to see more. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in my next video.